They can accelerate shared industrialization. The opportunity is to turn them into catalysts for joint investment, deeper integration, and transformation. If you align our ambitions, Africa and Europe can build far more than trade flows, gigafactories, battery and electric vehicle ecosystem, agro-industrial platforms, and green hydrogen value chains, alongside strong digital integration and regional corridors that define future supply chains. This is the moment to embrace a new model, made in Africa with Europe. Now, allow me to turn to a pillar that is absolutely central to Africa's investment future, the African Development Fund, and in particular, the success of its 17th replenishment. Without a strong replenishment, Africa will simply not have the concessional resources required to deploy the instruments that make private sector and private investment possible. The instruments that the risk, that stabilize, and that turn opportunity into bankable projects. Europe has historically been the backbone of the African Development Fund. Your leadership, your consistency, and your confidence in this institution have shaped the fund's impact for over half a century. And your leadership in ADF 17 will directly determine Africa's capacity to expand its pipeline, strengthen its guarantee mechanism, and deepen its private sector engagement. ADF 17 is therefore much more than a replenishment cycle. It is the fuel for the private sector transformation we are discussing in this forum, and the foundation upon which risk mitigation, infrastructure investment, and new industries will stand. Supporting ADF 17 means supporting a more competitive, more resilient, and more prosperous Africa. Senhoras, senhores, esta reunião representa uma oportunidade importante para reforçarmos a cooperação entre a África e a Europa, promovermos investimentos produtivos e criarmos novas oportunidades para os nossos povos. Acredito fermamente que o diálogo franco e o trabalho conjunto nos permitirão avançar com confiança rumo a futuro de paz, progresso e prosperidade partilhada. Muito obrigado.
Wow. I've never been to a place where somebody speaks all languages to cater for everyone in one moment. But thank you very much, sir. I want to call upon Mr. Ambrose Fayoli, the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, to now deliver his remarks.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour à tous. C'est un honneur pour moi d'être ici aujourd'hui et je remercie l'Union africaine et l'Union européenne pour avoir invité la Banque européenne d'investissement aux côtés de la BERD et de la Banque africaine de développement et aussi aux côtés de ce dynamique écosystème africain d'entreprises qui est si impressionnant. Le partenariat entre l'Afrique et l'Europe est central pour la mission de la BEI qui est active en Afrique depuis 1960. Dans la dernière décennie, nous avons investi 20 milliards d'euros et mobilisé plus de 50 milliards d'euros en Afrique, la moitié en faveur du secteur privé. Et en 2024, l'Afrique a été le récipient de 3 milliards d'euros de la part de la BEI, soit plus de 40% des engagements que nous avons pris en dehors d'Europe. Through EIB Global, we finance projects that deliver impact, sustainable growth, employment, and better living conditions. Our new strategy strengthens partnerships, reflecting our belief and prosperity and security are shared goals for Europe and Africa. As Team Europe, we have exceeded the 300 billion euros of investment targets for Global Gateway strategy, and we are now committing to surpassing 400 billion by 27. The EIB is on track as part of Team Europe to mobilize 100 billion of this. To achieve this, we are scaling up our financing tools and accelerating collaboration. The key word here is together. Together with the European Commission, we are pledging to finance more than 2 billion euros investment in renewable energy in Africa in the next 2 years. Actually following what we have already done last year in Cabo Verde to expand wind power with a loan from 39 million euros. Together with the European Commission, the African Development Bank and KfW, we are running Boost Africa to help fast-growing, innovative companies to scale. Together with leading African financial institutions such as EcoBank or Morocco's Banque Centrale Populaire or Mauritania's Alas Mana, we support small businesses in Africa, in particular to help financing SMEs that are led by women or young people. To cover the various segments of African markets, we are using our broad financing tools, which are from sovereign lending, corporate lending, SME support through financial intermediaries, to equity investments through funds combined with blending and technical assistance. On the continent, our focus is on enabling infrastructure. Health, water, energy, sustainable agriculture, transport, and digital inclusion, alongside support for the local private sector. An illustration is last week's signature in South Africa of a loan of 350 million euros with Transnet, the state-owned transport and logistics company. Supported by a grant from the European Union, this major investment will help South Africa move towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient and economy as part of the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the JETP. This investment, aligned with the EU Global Gateway strategy, will finance the renewal and rehabilitation of transport ports and freight railway infrastructure. It will allow also to support the development of new assets critical to building a green hydrogen value chain and facilitate a shift to cleaner modes of transport. Eventually, it will actually help strengthen the country's competitiveness and contributing to job creation. And we are also engaged here in the region in the Lobito Corridor, the key project for regional economic integration. Let me close by two messages. One, financing climate adaptation is a priority. EIB has pledged to double its adaptation financing to 30 billion euros by 2030. It focuses on water, cities, agriculture and vulnerable regions. Our projects range from forestry in Côte d'Ivoire to clean cooking solutions in East Africa, from sustainable cocoa to sustainable aviation fuels, on which we will have an announcement today. Second, investing in people is essential for sustainable growth. In Rwanda, we finance the African Center of Excellence for Digital Education. In Benin, we support the technical secondary schools. Here in Angola, we have invested 50 million euros in vaccination campaign for fighting against HPV. Clearly, Africa and Europe share a common destiny. By joining forces and investing in concrete high-impact projects, we can build a future based on shared prosperity, stability, and sustainability, and we are very proud at EIB to be part of this momentum. Let me finish by saying that as this forum is an amazing opportunity for networking, I encourage all of you to meet our EIB team present at the Business Forum to explore new ways of cooperation. Thank you very much.
I think that gives us an overview of where the opportunities lie in terms of financing, de-risking, and also looking at the footprint of the EBRD, their growing footprint in sub-Saharan Africa. And really that's very welcomed. The African Development Bank, their continued support in transformative projects. And then I think the role that these banks will play in de-risking and unlocking private investment in Africa is critical. So it gives us a great opportunity really as participants here at this business forum to engage the different banks, the representatives of those the bankers, and talk about what it is that you require, where you require it, and in which part of Africa you will need it. We have reached a tea break, but I want to negotiate with you. Can I negotiate with you? Great. All the Africans are like, yeah. And the Europeans are like, I don't know. Tell us first what you want to negotiate. So we want to take a short break. However, we're running a bit behind time, and we want to honor the time that we have set aside for today. So I want to ask that we take a 15-minute break instead of the longer time that we had allocated earlier on, because we're just running a little bit behind time. So we will be back here at 11 in this room. Use the opportunity to please come back. There's a very interesting high-level panel that will talk about investment in Africa, and we will start promptly at 11 right here in Diamante 1 and 2. Yes, so I will just be around and quickly give a call 5 minutes before 5 to 11. And so please, we want to ask you to, let's negotiate like that. Thank you so much. Great. And all the participants online, we look forward to seeing you again at 11 o'clock.
etunda. Caí, 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 mukilobo kwesa mosha inama. 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 Ilipangana kalamboya kabiri, ilipangana kalamboya kabiri. Eu sou King Bita, o mundo lozoka jimbunda. Eu sou King Bita, o mundo lozoka jimbunda. Caí, 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 mukilobo kwesa mosha inama. Caí, 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 mukilobo kwesa mosha inama. Ilifangana kalamboya kabiri, ilifangana kalamboya kabiri. Mulenge ungibusa kulikunda. De claros escuros a vida brinca em corações aflitos. O jogo da cabra cega, a luz brinca na cidade. O seu quente jogo de claros escuros, a vida brinca em corações aflitos. O jogo da cabra cega. Tandeira que vende fruta, vende-se. A quitandeira que vende fruta, vende-se. Laranja, minha senhora, laranjinha boa. Compra laranja, minha senhora, laranjinha boa. A luz brinca na cidade, o seu quente jogo. Cambadiami wai kewe, wai nukola, engashala boba, kushia mnene, engashala boba, kushia mnene. Shiamye, shiamye, shiamye. Shiamye, shiamye, shiamye. Galani jienda, galani jienda, galani jienda. Yai shiamye, kandala bikusha la boba. Shiamye, kandala bikusha la boba. Shiamye, kambada mi wai kawe, wai kutawe. Kambada mi wai kawe, wai kutawe. Engashala boba, kushia mbebe. Engashala boba, kushia mbebe. Fios feitos de lágrimas passadas, os meninos do Ambo fazem alegria. Do céu puxando as candentes mais bonitas com lábios de dizer nova poesia, soletram as estrelas como letras e vão juntando no céu como pedrinhas, estrela letras para fazer novas palavras, e vão juntando no céu como pedrinhas, estrela letras para fazer novas palavras. Os meninos à volta da fogueira vão aprender coisas de sonho e de verdade, vão aprender como se ganha uma bandeira, vão saber o que custou a liberdade. Com os nomes mais lindos do planalto, fazem continhas engraçadas de somar, juntam fábula com flores e com suor, e subtraem manhã cedo por luar. Dividem chuva miudinha pelo milho, multiplicam vento pelo poder popular. Os meninos à volta da fogueira vão aprender coisas de sonho e de verdade, vão aprender como se ganha uma bandeira, vão saber o que custou a liberdade. Palavras sempre novas, palavras deste tempo sempre novo, porque os meninos inventaram coisas novas, que até já dizem que as estrelas são do povo. Porque meninos inventaram coisas novas, que até já dizem que as estrelas são do povo. Os meninos à volta da fogueira vão aprender coisas de sonho e de verdade, vão aprender como se ganha uma bandeira, vão saber o que custou a liberdade. Assim contentes à voltinha da fogueira, soltam ao céu as estrelas já escritas, novas palavras para fazer redações. Capanga, Assis, Bandeira ou Machado, para os meninos também são constelações, constelações que brilham sempre sem parar. Palavras deste tempo sempre novo, multiplicam vento pelo poder popular. Porque meninos inventaram coisas novas, que até já dizem que as estrelas são do povo. Porque meninos inventaram coisas novas, que até já dizem que as estrelas são do povo. Os meninos à volta da fogueira vão aprender coisas de sonho e de verdade, vão aprender como se ganha uma bandeira, vão saber o que custou a liberdade. Os meninos à volta da fogueira vão aprender coisas de sonho e de verdade, vão aprender como se ganha uma bandeira, vão saber o que custou a liberdade.
You don't just visit Angola. You feel it. Like a drum in your chest, the heartbeat of Africa. Every corner, from mountains to shores, is pulsing with life. From the restless rhythm of the cities to the timeless traditions of the tribes, every smile carries on the beat. So if you're ready to experience a new frontier, a new adventure, to feel life's rhythm, then experience Angola. A place that isn't just seen, it's felt. You don't just visit Angola, you feel it. Like a drum in your chest, the heartbeat of Africa. Every corner, from mountains to shores, is pulsing with life. From the restless rhythm of the cities to the timeless traditions of the tribes, every smile carries on the beat. So if you're ready to experience a new frontier, a new adventure, to feel life's rhythm, then experience Angola. A place that isn't just seen, it's felt. You don't just visit Angola, you feel it. Like a drum in your chest, the heartbeat of Africa. Every corner, from mountains to shores, is pulsing with life. From the restless rhythm of the cities to the timeless traditions of the tribes, every smile carries on the beat. So if you're ready to experience a new frontier, a new adventure, to feel life's rhythm, then experience Angola. A place that isn't just seen, it's felt. You don't just visit Angola, you feel it. Like a drum in your chest, the heartbeat of Africa. Every corner, from mountains to shores, is pulsing with life. From the restless rhythm of the cities to the timeless traditions of the tribes, every smile carries on the beat. So if you're ready to experience a new frontier, a new adventure, to feel life's rhythm, then experience Angola. A place that isn't just seen, it's felt.
right, distinguished guests, shall we start? Those who are in the room, what do you say? Shall we start? No start? All right. I just want to get an indication from our moderator whether your panelists are all here, because I want to... Is everybody in the room? Meme Lago? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for honoring your time. We negotiated and everybody came 15 minutes late. Right. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin our high-level panel. For those of us who are only joining us now and those who are joining us online who missed the early morning session, I just want to quickly give you an overview, a quick recall of our program so far. We opened the day with an opening ceremony featuring President Ursula von der Leyen, Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, and welcoming remarks by His Excellency José de Lima Massano, the Minister of State for Economic Coordination of Angola. We then heard 3 opening remarks from our development finance institutions, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the African Development Bank Group, and the European Investment Bank, who shared important insights on scaling investments between Africa and Europe. If we want to trade more, if we want to scale our businesses in Africa, we need markets, different markets, and not only the African market, but beyond Africa. Where are those markets? We need this investment to happen. One, to create employment for Africans, and to make products and services that we can export to the rest of the world. I did a quick study recently just to look at, I think because of our history as Namibia, we've got great strong ties to Germany. And so I was Googling, and my interest is in brands and developing brands for export. So I Googled the brands that come from Germany, and there were some brands there that I actually thought were from South Africa, but they actually are from Germany. And that just the amount of investment that it takes to develop a brand that you can export and the value it brings back to your country and the continent, to say that this little thing here that you purchased, and it, with all its quality and everything that it does, the value that it adds to the GDP of our respective economies is enormous. And so I want to give us a round of applause for being late for 15 minutes. Give yourselves And some of us are like, huh? No, we will do no such thing. But welcome back. Thank you very much. I was outside, and I know that many of us didn't get coffee. We were still grabbing some coffee. So thank you very much for being back. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'm now delighted to introduce the first high-level panel of the day, focusing on the central question: how can we address the investment gap in Africa to boost investment and trade between Africa and Europe? This will be an in-depth and forward-looking discussion running until 12:30. So, Meme Lago, I think you've got a bit more time. To guide us through this conversation, I'm pleased to hand over to my fellow Namibian, our moderator, Ms. Paulina M. Elago. She's the former Executive Secretary of the Southern African Customs Union and an experienced trade economist. We are in very capable hands for this important exchange. Thank you, Meme Elago. The floor is yours. Please don't be too upset. I think a lot of women are running the show in Namibia, so it's just normal that you'll see another woman presenting here from Namibia.
Thank you, Director of Proceedings, my dear Sister Margaret, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, esteemed leaders of the private sector, ladies and gentlemen, señoras y señores, bon dia, good morning. My name is Paulina Elago, and I'm delighted to be moderating this session under the theme Accelerated Investment for a shared Africa-Europe prosperity. I will begin this session with an introduction, just to give you a sense of how we are going to structure this, an introduction of the topic and the panelists, and then I will guide the discussion around 3 broad questions. Each panelist will have up to 5 minutes or so to respond to a question that is presented to them to ensure balance and focused contribution. Having said that, let's look at the topic that we are going to be discussing under this high-level panel discussion. As you have heard this morning from our esteemed speakers and distinguished leaders who spoke this morning, Africa is one of the fastest growing regions globally, projected to expand by 3.9% in 2025, with unmatched opportunities in energy, infrastructure, agriculture, and technology. Yet, the continent attracts only 3% of global foreign direct investment and faces an annual investment gap of nearly $195 billion, particularly in infrastructure. Persistent perception of risk, limited information, and weak regulatory frameworks continue to hold back investor confidence, despite Africa's resilience and reforms to improve the investment climate. The challenge is clear: shifting Africa from a risk frontier to a preferred investment destination. And this requires critical de-risking mechanisms and practical pathways to attract global investment. And I believe both the President of the Commission and the ministers and also the heads of the FDIs elaborated on this. The EU Global Gateway Africa-Europe Investment Package, endorsed at the 6th AU-EU Summit, aims to mobilize 150 billion euros by 2027. And we heard from the President of the Commission this morning that already 120 billion has been mobilized. So really, that is a commendable achievement, but clearly we still need to move the target, to reach the target, and a lot more still needs to be done. And this focuses on transport, renewable energy, digital connectivity, green hydrogen, raw materials, and human development. Now, with blended finance vehicles that we heard about and innovative tools to de-risk projects and crowd in private capital, the focus must now move to moving from policy frameworks to bankable projects that deliver real impact for prosperity between EU and Africa, which is the theme of our panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, today's panel will explore how to bridge Africa's financing gap and unlock its full potential. We'll be focusing on investment climate and trade reforms to stimulate private capital, project origination and structuring via platforms such as the Africa Virtual Investment Platform, the Global Gateway Hub, financial mechanisms to de-risk investment and enhance profitability, and then the flagship projects, and also the role of DFIs in co-financing, risk mitigation, and catalyzing private sector and trade investment. We are fortunate to have a panel that brings together policymakers, private sector leaders, and development institutions. They represent a strong and well-balanced mix that will give us a valuable insight into how to bridge Africa's financing gap, accelerate investments, and strengthen cooperation among stakeholders. With that said, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists for this high-level panel. We have, as I said, from the policy perspective, Her Excellency Francisca Tajub Belobe, the African Union Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Industry, and Minerals. Her role places her at the heart of Africa's investment drive and economic agenda. Let's welcome Madam Commissioner to the stage with a round of applause. Next, we have also we'll have Madam Erika Gerritsen, the Director for International Partnership at the European Commission, a key figure in shaping Europe's international partnership and development policy. Please welcome on stage Madam Gerritsen. We have next Madam Nados Bekele Thomas, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, NEBAD. She is at the forefront of shaping Africa's development agenda, ensuring alignment with Agenda 2063 and mobilizing partnership for sustainable growth. Now, from the private sector, ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to welcome Madam Somachi Chris Asoluka, the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, a dynamic leader who's driving Africa's economic transformation through entrepreneurship. Last but by no means least, we have from the private sector also Mr. Benoit Chervalier, the Chief Executive Officer of BCH Invest, and is also the President of Africa Business Europe and the Vice President of Africa, Afrique MEDEF International, an employers federation. Through these roles, he mobilizes European business communities to engage with Africa's growth agenda. Let's once again give our panelists a warm round of applause, and we'll go right into our session. Thank you. Thank you. It's on? Okay, thank you. Thank you once again and welcome to this high-level panel discussion. Without wasting much time, we'll jump right into the first question. And this relates to the investment climate strategies, looking more at the bigger picture. Now, I want to invite Madam Asoluka from the private sector, followed by Mr. Chevalier, also private sector. I want to start with private sector representatives to really tell us, from a private sector perspective, what is holding back investors from committing more capital in Africa? And what would make the continent a more compelling investment destination? We have the numbers. We have the resources, we have the human capital, but there's still skepticism about the risk on the continent. So tell us from your perspective what it is that is holding back investors from investing or scaling up capital in Africa. Madam, over to you.
No, thank you so much, Paulina, for that lovely introduction of our panel today. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Somachi Krisasoloka, the Foundation. The Tony Elumelu Foundation is the largest philanthropic organization in Africa, and our work focuses on empowering young African entrepreneurs from all 54 African countries. We do this for three main reasons. One, we want to eradicate poverty. Two, we want to ensure that we're creating the jobs in the millions that our continent needs for prosperity. And three, we want to increase inclusive economic empowerment by ensuring that our women and our girls are not left behind in economic activity. Since 2015, when we started our TEF entrepreneurship program, we have disbursed over $100 million to 24,000 young men and women who have collectively created 1.5 million jobs and $1 billion in revenue. They've lifted over 1 million households out of poverty on the continent. And I say, thank you. And I say all this to say that a development agenda that does not center and prioritize our young people, in particular our young entrepreneurs, will never hit the target. It will never achieve its goals. Because at the end of the day, it's these young people and their SMEs that will create the jobs that our continent needs. It's not corporates, it's not governments, it's not development institutions. The help will not come from abroad, but it must be engendered locally in our grassroots, in our communities, by empowering these young entrepreneurs. And you know, in my mission leading the biggest entrepreneurship movement on the continent, I interact with these entrepreneurs on a daily basis. And entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, partners say the same thing. Capital is brave. Capital wants to invest. But capital will not invest if there is no predictability. So capital is not looking for perfection. Capital is looking for some level of certainty. So if we have policy instability, regulatory instability, then we will never attract the capital and retain and multiply the capital that Africa needs. Second, our entrepreneurs tell us as well that the perception around the continent is too negative to attract any capital. And so when our media is bombarding the world with negative stories around the continent, we do little to attract the capital that the continent needs. Yes, there's an information gap, meaning that a lot of investors are forced to make decisions without the insights and the data and the facts that they need to base those decisions on. So while we must invest in investment intelligence to provide the data, we must also be responsible in the type of stories that we tell about our continent, because that affects the attractiveness of our continent in the eyes of investors. Third is that we must also take infrastructure investment seriously. We can't live in a continent where over 60% lack access to electricity and speak around investment. Our entrepreneurs tell us that they spend 80% of profits on average in generating power for their businesses. We can't expect these entrepreneurs to scale and continue to create jobs if they're spending their paychecks and in providing electricity for their businesses. So while we must do the work we must to attract capital, we must also be very serious about investing in infrastructure, in particular power and electricity, so that we're able to retain our multiplier and grow that capital. And I think the final point, before I hand over back to Pauline, who I was chatting with earlier in this panel, is that we must have a long-term view when investing on the continent. The continent shouldn't be only for extraction, extractive purposes. We must think long-term prosperity. We must think about shared purpose. We must imbibe what my founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu, says, Africapitalism. And that's generating wealth for shareholders as well as stakeholders. So ensuring that community is carried along even as you start businesses and you scale these businesses. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I omitted one thing that I wanted to actually set as a rule for the panel, and that is to say that for each question, given the time that we have, you have up to, and that is up to 5 minutes. So I think you've done very well, but you have up to 5 minutes, so feel free to elaborate. But also, I think it will also give us time to actually engage the audience if time permits. Now, let's move on to Mr. Mr. Chevalier, I think you've highlighted a number of key points that I hope our policymakers have also noted, because I'll be coming to them to respond to that. Mr. Chevalier, again, from the private sector perspective, and now we've heard from the African private sector perspective, perhaps also getting to hear from the European private sector's perspective, what is holding back investors from committing more capital in Africa, and what would make the continent a more compelling investment destination?
So first, thank you very much. So first, good morning, everyone. Buen dia. Bonjour à tous. So I think here there is no single private sector. I mean, it seems obvious, but we should repeat it, from a large company to small enterprises or middle enterprises or informal sector. Basically, we're talking of total different categories and different challenges and opportunities. But they all share, and we all share, the same approach. It means accountability, risks, and at the end of the day, interest-driven. We should never forget this when talking about, or before talking about the private sector. Having said, I would like to deliver 3 messages here. First, and I think we should stop talking about investing in Africa. Why? Because I don't know any company or any country which trades with Africa, but it trades with a country. I don't know any single investor or company which invests in a narrative. It invests in a specific country for a specific project or deal. And this is because we have a group of success stories, deals, then we built a narrative, which is not exactly the same thing. 2, the second message is that we need to, in my view, to go and to move from a top-down approach in terms of policies, in terms of instruments, to a bottom-up one. What does it mean? It means that the initiative, the project, should be driven with that approach. And to do this, it means that companies, private sectors, need a friendly business environment. I think we are all convinced here about this, but what does it mean? It means fair taxation, tax stability, predictability, and of course, and a fair and stable environment. So, and the reality is that African companies, as well as European companies, face a very, very tough competitive environment. It's not Africa or nothing, or Europe or nothing. No, we are facing a very, very tough environment, both, again, European countries, African countries, European companies, African companies, and a friendly doing business environment is not a nice to have, it's a must have. So I will stop here at the moment, but I think it's a key message that I wanted to convey here.
Thank you so much. I think the message is very clear. Africa is not, it's a continent made up of countries, unique in their own ways, with their own jurisdictions and laws and regulations. And so really, we need to be more precise in that. Thank you for reminding us of that important reality and fact. Secondly, I believe you both highlighted the issue of predictability, which, you know, is critical, and also the image we portray about the continent. Clearly, there are opportunities there. Let us now move to the policymakers. Having heard what the private sector is saying, let's move to the policymakers and understand what strategies and policies are in place, or measures that you are undertaking to attract investment and to address some of the challenges that have been highlighted. And I'll start with you, Commissioner, Madam Taju Belobe.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous. Je souhaiterais prime d'abord pour l'invitation qui m'a été faite et déjà pour l'organisation de cet événement que nous estimons très important pour l'Afrique. En ligne avec la coopération que nous avons avec l'Union européenne. Mes notes sont en anglais, mais je pense que je pourrais peut-être mieux m'exprimer en français. Je souhaiterais d'abord dire merci pour les questions que j'ai écoutées, pour les éléments que j'ai écoutés, mais à la fois dire que l'un des risques auxquels l'Afrique a été exposée, c'est effectivement parce qu'elle a été fragmentée, elle a été divisée dans beaucoup de pièces, de beaucoup d'États, pour qu'elle soit plus facilement exploitable. C'est dans cet aspect que je n'adhère pas à la proposition de dire ne parlons pas d'investir en Afrique, parce que la voix de l'Afrique aujourd'hui, elle ne que dans son ensemble, dans la vision de l'Afrique continentale. Et ce n'est qu'en ayant une vision sur l'Afrique continentale que nous pouvons avoir de solutions à des problèmes qui existent dans les différentes parties de l'Afrique. Donc moi je resterai sur la question d'investir en Afrique, surtout parce que l'Afrique a un cadre politique d'investissement continental qui a été établi par l'Union africaine. Permettez-moi juste de vous citer le code d'investissement panafricain. Nous savons notamment aussi au niveau de l'AFCA, de la zone de libre-échange continentale, un protocole d'investissement. Nous avons on appelle ça un framework and model law pour les startups africaines. Nous avons des priorités qui sont adoptées dans l'agenda 2063. Nous avons un programme de support pour l'entrepreneuriat pour les petites et moyennes entreprises et pour les entreprises de femmes et de jeunes. Et nous avons un cadre stratégique pour la croissance et l'économique durable, inclusive. Et nous avons aussi des institutions, nous avons mis en place des institutions telles que le NEPAD qui est ici, comme aussi le RPRM, dont je pense que la collègue doit être dans la pièce, et d'autres institutions qui travaillent vraiment pour, et bien sûr, sans oublier la CELECAF, même que j'ai mentionné tout à l'heure, d'autres institutions qui existent aujourd'hui et qui travaillent pour que ces problèmes nationaux, du fait qu'ils n'ont pas de réponse au niveau national, puissent trouver des réponses continentales. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Clearly, there's a lot that is being done in terms of the policy framework and strategies to attract and catalyze investment on the continent. Now, let me turn to the European Commission. Madam Erika Geretsen, what concrete and actionable strategies can be or are you implementing to catalyze and sustain investment in Africa? I know the President did elaborate on some of them, but I think this is an opportunity now for us to get more details, particularly around the Gateway, Global Gateway Forum and so on.
Thank you very much, Paulina, and good morning to you all. Very happy to be here on this panel. I also note the majority of the panel are women, which I think is really good when we talk about businesses in Africa.
I did not want to say something about that. I thought it's pretty obvious. And coming from Namibia, where our president is female, and we had a female president this morning, it is only proper. A round of applause for that. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you very much. And indeed, as you said, Paulina, my president, Ursula von der Leyen, has indeed introduced the matter also in her own words, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to delve into this a little bit more. But just to start also about the setting the scene, a lot has been said on the potential. One of the potential that I really to invest on the African continent generally, acknowledging indeed that each country has its own specificities. The demographic dimension is really important. And I also want to pay tribute to the fact that 70% of the African population is under 30 years old. So there is a huge potential for young entrepreneurship, youth entrepreneurship here in Africa. And I also feel this dynamism. I was here last week here in this very room talking to the youth with the pre-discussion with the civil society and the youth organizations, and I could feel the tremendous energy coming from the youth and the youth organizations who are willing to participate in this agenda, in investing and in developing the African economy. So also a round of applause to the youth in investing in Africa. Also, another message that I think is important to channel, to ensure and to reassure the European businesses that investing in Africa is the right thing to do, is that the growth rate in Africa is more than 4%. Where else do you find such a growth rate, such an opportunity for driving investments here on the African continent for the African market? And I believe that this is also an important dimension. We talk a lot about the share of Europe in Africa and Africa respective shares in international trade. But what I do think is important also to emphasize is that the market is here. And this is also, it's this market which will create the demand that also companies need. And then from my conversations, talking to the private sector in my own functions, I also hear the fact that yes, there is a readiness to invest. However, there is a need to create a sustainable demand, and this is one of the challenges ahead. And in this sense, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is obviously an essential stepping stone in order to create this market here in Africa, creating the predictability for the private sector to invest. So maybe now more a little bit specifically to your question and what we are doing. So as the EU, we have developed the Global Gateway strategy, which we've been working on now for the last 3 to 4 years. And this was really a turning point in the way we were envisaging the relation between the European Union and the other continents in the world, and especially with Africa. This Global Gateway strategy also in response to the African Union 2063 strategy, which is at working to end poverty, to support the SDGs, but also starting from the finding that official development assistance will never make that happen. Now what we really need is indeed infrastructure. What we need is really having the private sector on board to invest here in Africa, an African private sector and the European private sector working together for this endeavor. However, there is indeed this perception that investing in Africa is very risky. And this is why, indeed, we need to work on this perception and also send the good news about the dynamism of the African economies and ecosystems. But we also hear the fact that there is a need to de-risk investment. And that's really what we are aiming at with our financial instruments, with the European Fund for Sustainable Development, working with development finance institutions, which we have heard, as well as the other European development finance institutions, in de-risking private sector investment in Africa. Also, working on the infrastructure gap is part of this Global Gateway strategy. When we are working more on sovereign type of lending, and again here providing concessional lending through the development banks of Europe and others to ensure that this infrastructure gap can be filled. And maybe just before handing back you, I think that what is important to say is that through this Global Gateway strategy, we are really trying to bring all the partners together and to work in this sense that ultimately the goal is what? It's to create sustainable jobs in Africa, for the African countries, for the African economies, to grow again in a sustainable manner in the future, but also in a values-based approach. And it's important for us to maintain a very high level of standards on all these investments that we are promoting, and this is why it's important to have all the actors around the table when we talk about the Global Gateway. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Value-based investments, sustainable investments, and clear instruments that are in place. And we'll talk later on about cooperation between the various stakeholders, and I'm happy you've raised that point. Let us now move to Madame Bekele Thomas, Auda Nepot, again to address the question of the concrete and actionable strategies that you are implementing to catalyze and sustain investment in Africa.
Thank you very much, and well, good morning or good afternoon. First of all, I would like to say that the combination of foundation and private sector is fantastic, because if you look at the West, it's the foundations that have made, tremendous effort in making sure that equitable, growth in countries are equitable by really putting, the numbers, stakeholders, more and more stakeholders in the economy. And that's why really the foundation of LMNO is doing, and I would like to congratulate that. And I would like to say to African private sector that we need more and more foundations. Making money is fine, but for the sustainable growth of that economy, you need to really have these foundations to support government. So it's really fantastic, and thank you very much. Second thing I would like to address, and I'm glad that the two commissioners are here. We are working together with the European Commission, and truly there is a clear understanding. That clear understanding is the fact that a fragmented Africa is not going to bring that growth, that transformation that we want for Africa. And working, yes, at national level, yes. I mean, you cannot have a continent without the nations and the regions. But they're linked, they're harmonized, and they're aligned. And that is critical. We have got the continental frameworks that are there. We have got the institutions that drive these continental frameworks, but they do not work hanging there. They have the pillars, and these pillars are the regional economic communities. And then they land at national level. Aligning policies, aligning the strategies is very important, and that's what the African Union Development Agency is doing. But certainly, growth and real transformation for the continent would only come if we have, if we talk about the continent. Okay. The vision 2063 is really transformative. Look at it. It's an aspiration, yes. It's an ambition, yes. They're moonshots, yes. But then they're translated in terms of actionable programs through the implementation plan, the 10-year implementation plan. Ladies and gentlemen, this 10-year implementation plan is a plan that is agreed by the UN also. At the UN high level, it's agreed there will be two agendas, the SDGs and the Agenda 2063, but just one single implementation plan for Africa, which is the second 10-year implementation plan. And at the level, at the national level, the UN resident coordinators, and I was one long time ago in many countries, when they have their development cooperation report, they involve us so that we make sure that that is aligned to the continental frameworks. Through the Africa Team Initiative, the continental framework is translated in terms of an alignment with the regional economic communities. The Africa Team consists of all the regional economic communities and the African Union Development Agencies and the other institutions like us. We're leading it because we have got the mandate of coordinating, but the AFCFTA, the CDC, and the others, APRN and others, including, I'm glad that the president of the ABC is here, including the private sector. Working together in harmony for one purpose is critical and very important. And that is the message that we're sending through that. And I would like to say that, our programs, which are the flagship programs, are foundational programs, catalytic programs that unlock investment at national level, regional level, and continental level. The program for infrastructure development program is critical, is very important. We have to link our countries. We have to connect our countries digitally, through rails, through roads, through our waterways. Is so critical that we have that. And the PIDA program, Your Excellency, maybe you were here, Monsieur Chevalier, 2 weeks ago, we had the private sector around these projects. What blocks us is really bankable pipeline projects. And bankable pipeline projects, which will produce, requires money, investment. And this is de-risking, by the way. Okay? And we are demanding for more resources to go into developing these pipelines. And working with the EU, working with the Japanese government, the Chinese, and all others, we try to develop our service delivery mechanism and experts pool so that we have as many bankable programs. And these bankable programs need to have, excellence. I mean, they have to have the quality that investors would require. And through our project, the PQL, the project quality level, which is an AU seal for excellence, we make sure that whatever comes out as feasibility study has got the quality it requires. Now investors are required to really invest in these projects and programs. And two things, are bottlenecks for investors. One is, my sister just talked about it, is this whole perception about Africa. And it depends. When it pleases them, it's bad we get bad perception. When it's not in the interest, we have got good, because I've seen, really investors going in the most difficult places, in Central African Republic where I work, where there is war. In the midst of war, there is a lot of investment. So, truly, we need to really address that, but it has to be a partnership. And secondly, that no wonder that we are talking about the African Credit Rating Agency. We are establishing that credit rating agency, not to be the sole credit authority, but at least to give that kind of just and fair, assessment of situations. Right. Okay. So, I mean, you've asked me, I'm the development agency that does everything, so very difficult. Clearly. But truly, when you talk about all these things, we need to look at the critical things. Thirdly, for any investor, what you require is a market. So establishing the free trade area, with all the demographic dividends that we have, and also the 1.3 trillion, which is going to grow, is critical market. Okay. You can produce, but without market, you cannot do. Among ourselves first, but also you have this big, market for others. The ASEM, the African Single Electricity Market, which my sister touched upon, is a critical thing. In Africa, we have got the regional power pools. When I went to present that in the States, in America, they were mesmerized because they don't have the regional markets. We are not trying to integrate it into one market. The African
If you can wrap up, because I want to have a follow-up question on some of the specifics
single
that you are raising
transport
now.
market is critical. also the market to facilitate investment. So I'll stop here and I'll have.
Thank you, Madam Bektele Thomas, for that insightful expose of what you're doing, and I believe we'll still come to some of the issues. I think we've heard about the key issues that are holding back investors from investing more capital on the continent. We've also heard about the policy imperatives and strategies that are being employed by the various institutions to attract more investment, and we're talking about sustainable investment. I want us to now move to project originations and financial structuring, because I think that becomes more important. And you started talking to that, but I think we want to be more, to look at that more specifically. I know there are various instruments, and you did speak to some of those, Erica and Madam Commissioner, but I also want us to elaborate a bit more. First of all, understanding what channels are available for companies to engage with you. I mean, when you're talking about project origination and also financial structuring, how can they engage? And if you can tell us more about the practical tools and frameworks that you have in place to support investment in Africa. Madam Commissioner, let's start with Erica Gerritsen. Maybe if you can, tell us more about this, and maybe also some of the specific examples that you can share with us regarding the tools, more specifically how private sector can engage you.
Thank you very much. Very good. So now indeed we can go a little bit more into the detail of how we are rolling out this Global Gateway strategy, especially here in Africa. So as the President said, we have an investment package of 150 billion that has been, for which we are committed, and that is really being rolled out very successfully already. We already have 138 Global Gateway projects and flagships that are being implemented here in Africa. And I will come to examples, but maybe coming to the question of the project origination, which I think is indeed a very important question, because we need to here also plug this gap between the appetite for investment and at the same time the tools that we are putting in place. And sometimes the perception is that there is a huge gap and that it is extremely complicated to access this information or to access the funding opportunities. And that's why we have launched, and the President has launched during the Global Gateway Forum in October in Brussels, what we are calling the Global Gateway Investment Hub. So the Global Gateway Investment Hub, I will explain maybe in a few words, is meant at bringing together all the stakeholders, especially in our member states, through what we call the team nationals, that can identify who are the private sector actors in their country, who are interested or who have project and investment ideas or pipeline to invest here in Africa. And through these Global Gateway Investment Hub, we channel these project proposals to the right actors, so to the development finance institutions that would be ready to support the project, but also looking at what is necessary to make this project happening and successful and being successful, bringing the skills that are necessary, the regulatory framework that is essential, and so also working on these different aspects. So that's the purpose of the Global Gateway Investment Hub. So to be concrete, there are several entry points to access through this Global Gateway Investment Hub. So one is member states, and European member states are creating again these team nationals in each of the capitals in Europe. We also obviously are present with our EU delegations all around the world. In Africa, we have EU delegations in all the countries. The EU delegations are also the entry point for private sector from Africa to have the initial conversations, this kind of discussion, and obviously also working hand in hand with the development finance institutions, the EIB, the EBRD, the African Development Bank, but also the national banks like Proparco, AFD, for example, KfW, FMO, etc. So these are the different entry points and the different types of contacts that we can establish and that you can establish if you have these initiatives that you think would deserve or would require some support from the EU's perspective. Now, maybe on the examples, I would like to just flag a couple of them. First, one of the very important and interesting flagship for us in the Global Gateway here in Africa is what we call the manufacturing of vaccines in Africa. Through this flagship, we are investing and completely in alignment with the African strategy on the manufacturing of vaccines in Africa. That is a strategy that was developed after COVID, when we realized that only 1% of all the vaccines were actually produced in Africa. And as we were all being taken aback by this question of the sovereignty, this was also the case in Africa. And therefore, as a response to this, we have, and again here my president von der Leyen has been very much at the forefront of saying we need to support the African strategy and this African manufacturing strategy. And that's why we put the MAF Plus manufacturing of vaccines in Africa strategies, through which we are investing up to 2 billion euros. This is developed in a number of countries, because when it comes to vaccines, exactly, you cannot say that, or pharmaceutical products, not each and every country in Africa can equip itself with the production that is, or capacity that is necessary. And this is where, again, having this Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the regulatory framework at continental level is so essential. So through MAF Plus, we are investing in South Africa, in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Senegal in particular, with European private sector investing in those countries and really developing facilities to produce pharmaceutical and products that are for the African market. But through this, what we are also doing is technology transfer, because those companies that are implementing and investing do transfer their technology to the local actors. We are also building research and technology capacity. We are building skills and therefore also building capacities for high-skilled labor and employment in those countries. This is a very important flagship that really brings along all the dimensions that you can think of when thinking about investing in Africa. But since we are here in Angola, of course, a word on the Lobito corridor, which is another of these huge Global Gateway flagship investments, which again demonstrates that the purpose of the Global Gateway is not only to extract the minerals and run away with them. The idea really is to ensure that transformation can happen here on the African continent, but also and that all these resources and this wealth that is coming out of these critical materials and minerals can be used to invest here in Africa to create an economic ecosystem around the infrastructure that is needed, the transport that this will develop, and all the economic activities that goes along with it. And the third example that is very close to my heart, in fact, is the Invest in Young Businesses in Africa initiative. And I know that the foundation was at the very beginning also together with me, in fact, on this initiative. So very happy that this is really blooming and booming. Because this shows also that Global Gateway is not only about big infrastructure, big companies that are investing, but again, there is all this ecosystem of smaller companies that need to and that can seize the opportunities of these investments. And that's why the Invest in Young Businesses in Africa initiative provides this early stage type of financing that supports young businesses, young entrepreneurs in starting up businesses here in Africa. And again, I know that there's so many initiatives and so many ideas that are blooming, that this Invest in Young Businesses in Africa is also having all these ramifications that are extremely good, with a specific angle, again, on women entrepreneurship, but also seed funding and all the type of financial differentiation, the different financial tools that are necessary to respond to the actual need and to adapt to the needs of the entrepreneurs and to adapt to the needs of those who want to launch new investment projects. So these are the three flagship initiatives that I wanted to highlight here. But again, the Global Gateway Investment Hub really is for us the entry point that we now want to work on in order to have it also a more transparent, more openly based platform for potential projects to come through.
Thank you. I'm glad you also just highlighted how the private sector can engage and what entry point there are in delegations, in the various countries, and also just for us to appreciate really at the practical level what it means, and the projects that you've highlighted are very important in that sense. Let me move to Madam Commissioner. If you can tell us also about the tools, practical tools, particularly if you can maybe speak to the Africa Virtual Investment Platform.
Merci beaucoup. Je souhaiterais d'abord signaler que quelque chose que Madame Erika a dit, et je pense que nous ne sommes pas souvent très conscients de cela. Jusqu'à là, quand nous parlons d'investir en Afrique, nous parlons de projets ponctuels, des exécutions ponctuelles, et sans qu'il y ait le développement du marché. Donc, Madame Erika a mentionné des gros projets d'infrastructure. Une entreprise vient, elle obtient le financement, elle exécute le projet et l'entreprise part. Mais l'entreprise n'est pas engagée dans l'exploitation de cette structure qui a été construite. Ça, c'est, je dirais, c'est 70% des projets qui sont réalisés en Afrique. Donc, ces projets n'ont pas un impact sur le développement des marchés. Et on ne peut même pas appeler ça faire de l'investissement. Je pense que quand nous parlons aujourd'hui de faire de l'investissement, nous sommes en train de parler de vraiment apporter de financement, non seulement pour les bankable projects, mais aussi dans des autres secteurs. La Banque mondiale a estimé jusqu'à 170 billions de dollars de gap d'investissement annuel. Par contre, si on analyse ces chiffres, on voit que cela n'est pas lié aux questions de ressources humaines, ni aux questions de l'éducation, ni aux questions de la santé, ni à la science, ni à la technologie, ni à l'innovation, ni à la recherche, ni au développement. Donc, cela est réservé qu'au secteur d'infrastructure, notamment infrastructure de l'énergie. Mais cela ne peut pas, le développement ne se limite pas qu'à cela. Ce que je veux dire avec cela, c'est que nous devons, quand les entreprises viennent en Afrique, ils doivent s'engager dans le long terme au développement des secteurs qui vont leur donner dans le long terme de bénéfices et de profits. Il faut déjà un changement dans la pratique de l'investissement qui existait. Et il faut aussi un changement dans la manière que et les États et l'économie africaine aussi voient ces engagements qui arrivent. Pour moi, ça c'est très important. Et Madame l'a dit, mais moi je voulais vraiment, comme vous dites en anglais, le highlight. En termes maintenant je viens sur la question, en tant que commissaire, vous le savez, à la Commission, nous élaborons des politiques et nous avons nos agences qui font les implémentations. Donc après que nous avons fait analyser et élaborer notre plan stratégique, les agences exécutent, mais nous sommes quand même engagés dans la recherche d'instruments pour faciliter l'investissement. Et effectivement, l'un des problématiques que nous avons trouvé, c'est qu'il n'y a pas suffisamment d'informations sur les cadres d'investissement en Afrique. Et c'est ça qui amène à la distorsion de l'opinion sur l'Afrique. Et c'est pour cela que nous avons établi avec l'OECD et aussi avec l'Union européenne cette plateforme virtuelle de facilitation d'investissement. Cette plateforme virtuelle qui est encore en train d'être préparée et n'est pas encore opérationnelle, elle vise vraiment à avoir tous les cadres d'investissement du continent afin de pouvoir faciliter les investisseurs pour pouvoir connaître les éléments essentiels à leurs investissements. Donc, on est en train de réfléchir jusqu'à quel niveau nous pouvons aller, si faire de cela aussi un forum pour les investisseurs d'échange. Donc, c'est un projet qui est encore en développement, mais nous pensons qu'elle est cruciale pour et même pour pouvoir présenter le projet, puisque nous avons identifié des flagship projects pour pouvoir les présenter afin d'intéresser les investisseurs. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. And I believe this is really why the partnership between EU and Africa becomes very critical, because there's room for collaboration. It opens up scope for collaboration to ensure that we address the challenges that have been highlighted. And information is one of them. Access to information, as it was said, it does not need to be perfect, but at least facilitate information. You also raised the question of access to finance, and I think I want to transition now into that, to the private sector. Having had the various instruments that have been elaborated upon in terms of facilitating investment, access to finance still remains a major bottleneck, particularly for small and medium-scale enterprises across the continent. And from your perspective, as private sector, which tools would generate opportunities for companies to invest in the continent? And really, again, we want to start with Mr. Chevalier, and then we'll go on to the foundation.
Merci beaucoup. Là, je vais répondre en français pour cette question. Je pense qu'il faut qu'on distingue le financement des entreprises du financement des projets. Ce n'est pas du tout la même chose. Quand on parle du financement des entreprises, ça revient donc à leur capital. Ça veut donc dire comment on les soutient dans leur création, dans leur développement, donc à travers notamment des fonds tels que Afrique Invest et beaucoup d'autres. Le financement des entreprises, donc là je parle d'entreprises sur le continent africain. Le financement des entreprises, c'est aussi une question qui est majeure en Europe pour les faire justement grandir. C'est le fameux scale-up. C'est que la petite entreprise devienne une belle PME, la PME devienne une ETI et que l'ETI devienne, l'entreprise de taille intermédiaire, devienne un grand groupe. Et ça, je pense que c'est un constat partagé clairement sur le continent africain, comme d'ailleurs clairement sur le continent européen. Et c'est ce qui crée de la résilience, c'est ce qui crée du muscle. Et c'est ce qui crée à la fin des filières. Moi, je suis profondément convaincu qu'on a tous intérêt à créer des filières parce que ça crée encore une fois ce que je viens de dire, du muscle, mais aussi de la résilience et donc demain de la croissance et de l'innovation. Donc, il y a des instruments, des politiques, des choix à faire pour le financement des entreprises. Et ensuite, il y a le financement des projets. Et le financement du secteur privé, c'est les deux. Ce n'est pas que l'un des deux, c'est les deux. Et sur le financement des entreprises, évidemment, ça va toucher avant tout les PME, voire les toutes petites entreprises, voire le secteur informel. Une grande entreprise, elle n'a pas de problème de financement. C'est pas son sujet. En revanche, une PME et encore une fois des toutes petites entreprises, si. Donc là, si on reprend des chiffres que certains qui ont pu être mentionnés, disant que ce soit les chiffres de la Banque africaine ou d'autres, que les PME africaines, ça représente à peu près 90% du business et plus de 60% des emplois. Donc on voit bien que là, l'enjeu, c'est de renforcer à travers les lignes de crédit, à travers les interventions et les soutiens des différentes organisations. Maintenant, le financement des projets, lui, il est différent. Il est différent parce que, à mon sens, ça soulève d'autres questions, et j'en mettrai deux, et je prendrai un exemple. Le premier, c'est celui du rapatriement des dividendes et la facilité de, lorsque un investisseur étranger arrive, qu'il puisse, comment dire, non pas se désengager du pays, c'est pas du tout ça, certains peuvent le faire, mais tout simplement c'est dans la flexibilité, et tout simplement c'est son choix de pouvoir le faire. Et il y a des pays d'ailleurs africains qui ont mis en œuvre des cadres qui fonctionnent très bien. Je pense au Maroc ou à Maurice. Donc en réalité ça existe. La question c'est que ça devrait être beaucoup plus développé, parce que quand vous n'avez pas cette flexibilité-là, vous avez une barrière à l'entrée, et ça c'est le fait que le but c'est pas, on est tous convaincus ici, et si on est là aujourd'hui c'est qu'on est convaincus. Le but c'est, si on veut changer d'échelle, il faut convaincre les non convaincus, et c'est ça que je disais tout à l'heure. Et pour convaincre les non convaincus, c'est justement d'avoir cette agilité, cette flexibilité, de pouvoir attirer et de pouvoir utiliser comment dire, ces capitaux. Et l'autre volet, c'est celui des taux de change, comment dire, du risque de change, notamment pour les monnaies locales, permettant justement d'atténuer ce risque et de créer différents instruments comme ils existent, pour pouvoir les intégrer. Et je terminerai par un exemple auquel je tiens, que j'ai vu personnellement, qui est dans le domaine industriel. Moi, je crois beaucoup à l'industrie. Et c'est un banquier qui vous le dit. Je crois beaucoup à l'industrie parce que l'industrie, précisément, encore une fois, c'est ce qui renforce la chaîne de valeur, c'est ce qui crée un collectif. De la même manière, je crois au collectif. Et donc, si on est d'accord que les deux axes fondamentaux, c'est l'industrialisation, et deux, la transformation locale des matières premières. Donc pour assurer la transformation locale des matières premières, c'est évident, ça satisfait 4 objectifs. Ça génère des ressources, du revenu, donc du PIB, et c'est ça qui permet de financer des travaux d'infrastructure, des hôpitaux, des écoles, etc. 2, ça crée des emplois, directs bien sûr, mais surtout indirects. C'est justement le fait qu'on crée ces filières, le fait qu'on crée ces instruments de résilience. 3, ça renforce la souveraineté, puisqu'on n'est plus monodépendant, mais on a une multiplicité d'acteurs, donc ça renforce les souverainetés. Et 4, ça permet également de lutter contre le réchauffement climatique, et c'est là où j'arrive à mon exemple pour finir. Parce que quand on veut construire une usine de transformation, il faut de l'énergie. On est d'accord. Donc si on fait de l'énergie, on ne va pas la prendre dans les villages d'à côté. Si on veut créer des énergies, que ce soit des turbines, que ce soit des barrages, ça ne se crée pas en 6 mois, ou ça ne se crée pas dans 1 an. Et la singularité que nous avons aujourd'hui, c'est le choc des urgences. On n'a pas le temps en fait. On n'a pas de temps géopolitique, on n'a pas de temps par rapport aux besoins démographiques et aux besoins d'emploi. Donc comment on traite cet élément-là? Donc pour générer cette construction d'usines de transformation, donc il faut de l'énergie. Donc on va par exemple pouvoir utiliser du gaz liquéfié à court terme pour assurer cette transition-là. Et ça, le message que je veux donner là-dessus, c'est justement cette agilité et le fait d'avoir la big picture, le fait d'avoir la vision globale. Voilà, le but, c'est pas de financer, vous m'avez compris, mais le but, c'est de se dire, il vaut mieux aujourd'hui utiliser ça pour pouvoir effectuer ces usines de transformation, plutôt que de les envoyer à l'autre bout du monde, que de toutes les manières, elles doivent être transformées et un petit peu reviennent sur le continent mais en réalité quasiment pas, et donc de pouvoir assurer cette transition et ce renforcement dans la chaîne de valeur. Merci. Visiblement, ça.
Thank you, Mr. Chevalier. You've raised quite a number of important points, and the issue of flexibility, but also the issue about climate, which is clearly very important as well. But let me move on to the foundation and also just ask the same question about access to finance.
No, thank you so much, Paulina. Speaking to our entrepreneurs, the number one challenge that entrepreneurs across the continent face is definitely their access to finance. And I think on the African continent, the context is a little peculiar, given that whereas startups in other parts of the world can rely on friends, family for that first check, in Africa it's a missing middle. So a lot of startups who have ideas, who have great innovative initiatives that they're trying to launch, cannot go to commercial lenders because it's too expensive. And then venture capital comes a little later down the line. And so they're left stranded. Who do they look to for that first check, to start that concept, to take that idea to market, to launch that business? And that's where the Tony Elumelu Foundation comes in. Because we recognize that entrepreneurs across the continent are stepping up to the responsibility that the private sector must transform our continent for good in our lifetime. So entrepreneurs are no longer waiting for handouts. They're not waiting for government. They're not waiting for international agencies. They're seeing themselves as that catalyst change maker, that catalytic change that can transform their communities, their countries, their regions. And it's up to all of us to support them in taking up that mantle of responsibility, because it's a huge responsibility to bear. And so every year when we open up applications for our Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program, we can only fund and support about 1,000 to 3,000 entrepreneurs each year. But we get applications over 400,000, 500,000, 600,000. So you see that there's so many ideas on the continent. Africa is not suffering from a lack of ideas, totally not. It's not suffering from a lack of initiative or a lack of responsibility. These entrepreneurs want to start something. And so when we can only take 1,000, 3,000, that's far less than 1% of the applications that we're getting every year. We know that we must do more. And so that's why I'm extremely grateful to be on this panel with Erica from the EU Commission, because they've identified the work that we do as transformative. And instead of trying to replicate the wheel or reinvent the wheel, they've identified the Tony Elumelu Foundation as a last mile implementer that they can work with, scale the work that we do, so that through these entrepreneurs, we're creating millions more jobs. And so I'm very grateful that the EU has put entrepreneurship and young entrepreneurs at the center of their Africa development agenda. And we're extremely thrilled by the results that we're seeing already. So that's access to finance, the number one challenge that entrepreneurs have. But number two is that entrepreneurs don't only need funding. They need mentorship. They need training. They need access to markets. They need access to networks. They need visibility. And so the work that we do is holistic, because if you focus on just access to finance, then you see that the entrepreneurs start their businesses, but they're not sustained, they're not scaling. So you need the regulatory environment, you need the policy environment that's conducive to these ideas and these initiatives that the entrepreneurs are launching. And so that's part of my job as the CEO of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, is also to travel across the continent, meeting with heads of states, meetings with ministers, bringing them to the same table as the entrepreneurs, so that they hear directly from these entrepreneurs about the challenges and the constraints that they're facing in doing business in that country. Because you see, listening to these policymakers and heads of states, there's often an information vacuum. They're not even aware of some of these constraints the entrepreneurs are facing. Sometimes there's a lag in policy, whereby they think they've set the right policies, but then the entrepreneurs on ground aren't feeling it yet. And so they think they've done the right job, but then the entrepreneurs who are in the markets tell you, no, we're not feeling any effect yet. And so we're also bringing, these entrepreneurs to their policymakers, so that exchange of information takes place, and so that these policymakers are not isolated in their vacuum, thinking they're doing the right thing. So we can't just speak of access to finance. We must speak of training, mentorship, regulatory environment, things like taxation, things like infrastructure, things about access to market. We always say Africa is not trading with itself, and only about 10%, 8% intra-Africa trade goes on. But then we can't, talk about that when we're not, centering the lack of infrastructure, the road network, the fact that to travel from Lagos to DRC, I had to take about 3 connecting flights. The fact that it's only 2.5 hours away, but there's no direct flight to that country. The fact that Africa is not as connected as it ought to be. So, entrepreneurs cannot thrive if we're not putting together the right enabling ecosystem to support them. And I think my last point of this is visibility. And so we must tell these success stories that are happening in their millions across the continent in order to ensure that these entrepreneurs are having the right partnerships, the right investments, the right access to markets. We must tell their stories. And so I'm looking at the media, I'm looking at academia. We must tell more African case studies. In our African universities, they should be learning about successful African startups. We shouldn't be exporting case studies from abroad, where we have indigenous entrepreneurs who are doing great work. We're looking at the media. We should tell more positive African entrepreneurial stories, because these young people are creating businesses that are truly transformative. When we go to events like this, we must showcase their businesses, showcase their products and services, because it's only by creating the right narrative that we position them to receive the investment that they need to thrive.
Thank you, Madam Osaluka. We're running out of time, and the program director is already hinting, but I want us to jump to the final question, that is of coordination and cooperation. How do we actually enhance cooperation between the various stakeholders to ensure that we are able to mobilize investment? Madam Bretvele.
Yeah, thank you
2
very
minutes,
much.
please, because we're running out of time, so that
Thank
I
you
can
very
allow
much.
everyone to speak
You've
to the
already
same.
taken 1 minute, so thank you very much. So I think it's very important that we have the programs that it requires. Looking at, for example, the pharmaceutical industries, together with the EU, we did the African medical harmonization program, which really looks at our authorities, the regulatory authorities, and trying to see on how they can harmonize. And it's harmonized now. We have the model law. The African Medicine Agency is created as a result of that, and we are very grateful to the EU. When we have got shared vision and shared purpose, then that's where the coordination arises. And now we have got 24 medical products that we want to really support in the soils of Africa. And if the EU Commissioner talked about this support, it's based on that priority areas. Talking about infrastructure is foundational. You cannot do anything without the infrastructure, but integrated corridors are critical. That is, it's not just building roads and building railways, but around it, really looking at the livelihoods, economies being built around, the energy being there, the ICT being there, and everything is critical. And that's why this corridor approach is very critical and very important. Therefore, our feasibility studies are really expanded to include the economic zones, the agricultural parks, and all the elements that would make that road to be really, in a way, very viable. The third thing that I will talk about is the whole thing about, what the foundation is doing. Under the Energize Africa, what we're trying to do is that Africa is overcrowded with innovation centers, accelerators, and other programs, that are skills-related programs. But that coordination, that really knowledge building is not there. And therefore, the Energize Africa, what it does is really look at that and standardize and raise the qualities to make sure that they are impactful and responsive to the young ones. It's very critical for us to understand that, our role is setting standards, facilitating, and making sure that the scaling up from national, vertical, and horizontal integration is there at all levels, national, regional, and continental levels. So I'll stop there because there's so much that we do, really making sure that that coordination happens, because our mandate is to coordinate all development activities in the continent, to monitor the progress, but also to implement, where there are gaps, and also the flagship programs, the legal flagship programs. And finally, I would like to say that we have got the political muscle, which is critical, because to do that, we need a political muscle. Our heads of state and government orientation committee consists of 33 heads of state. And, I report to them, I report the progress report, but also I report the work plan. And therefore, whatever there is in terms of gaps, that is where, we present and get the approval and also getting the political buy-in.
Thank you so much. Let me go back to the private sector before I give the commissioners and the commission the final word on coordination and also concluding remarks. Shall we start with the foundation? 1 minute each, just to tell us about how effective coordination is important between the various stakeholders, political, private, and DFIs.
Yeah, no, I'll just take a minute. I think that every single stakeholder has an important role to play, and so there should not be duplicity of roles. For the political sector, the public sector, I think it's important to uphold the rule of law, consistent policy, clear policy, less ambiguity, and consistent application and / enforcement. So let's uphold contracts. Let's make sure approvals don't take weeks where they can take days, don't take days when they can take hours. I think for private sector, it's all about responsible investing and looking to the long term and not thinking about what you can grab or the profit you can make, but thinking about shared purpose, thinking about Afro-capitalism, thinking about how to invest in a way that creates value, not just for your stakeholders, but shareholders as well, meaning that the communities in which you operate. And I think finally for DFIs like the EU and for the AU, again, our partnership with the EU remains one of our biggest partnerships, and we try to replicate that model with other development agencies. The message we tell is don't try to reinvent the wheel. Look for last mile implementers like the Tony Elumelu Foundation with a track record, the insights, the goodwill, the resources to make sure that these programs are at scale, but of course, reaching those it should target and creating the impact it should be creating.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chevalier?
Thank you.
On coordination, 1 minute.
Yeah, so very challenging.
I know.
Now, let me start by saying that clearly DFIs as well as ECAs, we have not so much talked about ECAs here, so the credit agencies also play a crucial role, and how and what has been done in a recent past, the coordination and the work together also is important, not to, let's say, work in silos as maybe it used to be in the past. So that's my first message. My second message is very simple. Delivery, delivery, delivery. At the end of the day, this is what matters. And for this, let me maybe lay a little bit blunt. I think we need to be less bureaucratic, I would say, in a massive manner. What do I mean by this? Is that people, departments dealing with control, audits, due diligence, procurements, etc., have dramatically increased over the past few years at the expense of departments, units, people dealing with operations. And actually it should be other way around. We need people working on projects, on operations. I'm not saying that due deal procurement are not important. What I'm just saying is that we need to change it to focus achievements on the delivery. And that's, I think, most private sector companies are ready to do this. And my simple message is, let's just build it together. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's obvious that, cooperation really happens at different stages of the project cycle as well, which is why you're highlighting that point. Let me now turn to the Commissioner to give your final word on not only cooperation, but also your concluding remarks as we now come to the end of this panel. Madame Commissioner.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais d'abord faire un lien avec la conférence du G20 qui vient d'être conclue à Johannesburg. Je pense que le futur de l'Afrique, l'avenir de l'Afrique est lié à l'avenir du monde. Et du même que nous avons été capables travailler sur des points et des visions communs concernant le développement du monde, notamment le développement de l'Afrique, dans cet cadre tellement haute et diplomatique qui est le G20. Je pense que c'est à tout niveau que l'Union africaine collabore avec ses partenaires. Nous sommes ici aussi dans le cadre de la coopération, n'est-ce pas? Donc nous coopérons déjà avec nos politiques. Déjà au niveau stratégique, nous coopérons et nous avons la coordination. Tout à l'heure, ma sœur, elle a été très spécifique quand elle a parlé même des mécanismes de coordination qui existent déjà entre les Nations Unies et entre l'Union africaine. Donc nous pensons que l'opinion de l'Union africaine, ce que nous devons nous intégrer dans les démarches, dans les stratégies de croissance mondiale. Et nous y sommes. Alors, nous avons les instruments, nous avons les stratégies, nous avons les politiques, et je suis totalement d'accord avec ce que vient de dire M. Chevalier, c'est au niveau de l'implémentation que nous faisons et nous avons beaucoup de challenges. Et c'est sur ces challenges que nous sommes en train de travailler. Nous nous sommes dédiés actuellement à l'appui, à la soutien du développement du secteur privé en Afrique, parce que nous comprenons, et quand je disais tout à l'heure qu'il ne s'agit-il pas seulement d'avoir les gros projets, nous comprenons qu'il ne peut pas avoir du développement en Afrique sans le secteur privé africain. Et c'est dans cela, effectivement, que nous sommes en train de saluer les efforts qui sont faits de part et de l'autre pour préparer ce secteur qui n'est pas non plus prêt à apporter son propre développement. Et c'est là le meilleur challenge. Le challenge n'est pas seulement comment attraire le capital d'investissement étranger. Non, le challenge est comment créer une dynamique dans le secteur privé en Afrique. Et pour cela, il faut l'implémentation, l'opérationnalisation, la formation, vraiment à tous les niveaux. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Let us now move to the EU Commission. Madam Geretsen, your concluding remarks as well as a few words on cooperation.
Thank you so much. Very interesting conversation, really. I enjoyed every part of it, and it's really a lot of food for thought. And I won't be long. It's just coordination. Well, I think that obviously a business forum like we are organizing these days here in Luanda is part of it. And so we are very grateful to the government of Angola for hosting this business forum, and to all of you for having responded to the invitation by the European Commission and the African Commission to hold this business forum, because as also Vice President Fayol was saying in his introductory remarks, this is really the moment for networking, for connecting, for understanding each other, and for listening to each other's needs to make this common project a success indeed. We are also organizing similar business fora at country level, and so we're one by one going from country to country, having this kind of moments of sharing information and trying to see this operationalization and concrete transactions, concrete business, concrete ideas blooming during these business fora. So that's one of the elements of the architecture that we are putting in place to put this coordination in place. But I think that dialogue remains also very important. And I believe that having this dialogue open between the EU and the EU is essential at all levels. And it is there. It's a very strong partnership. It is a very long-standing partnership. It is a reliable partnership that we are in between Africa and Europe. And that is something that I really want to emphasize this reliability of this and long-standing, nature of this relation between the EU and the AU and between the two continents. Our futures are actually bound to evolve in the same direction, and so it's really very important that we have this work together. So that's really what I wanted to say, and cooperation is taking place at all levels. And maybe the final word is I talked about Global Gateway which started just after COVID, so in 2021. So Global Gateway until now was a little bit in its startup phase, right? So now the moment is for us all collectively to move from the startup to the scale-up phase of the Global Gateway, and I can sense that this is going to happen with all of us working together on this objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me also thank you, all panelists, for such an insightful contribution to this important discussion. We've obviously run out of time. When you sit here, you always think you have all the time in the world, but then you suddenly realize that you really don't have the time as you had thought. I want to just say that what we have heard today is that accelerating investment in Africa requires more than vision. It demands action. And also, the panel has shown to us that when stakeholders work together, the Africa-EU partnership can achieve the ambitious targets and unlock sustainable and inclusive growth. I believe the call to action is very clear. Let's strengthen collaboration, align priorities, and seize the opportunities before us to accelerate investment into Africa. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. Please give the panelists a warm round of applause, and I wish to conclude this panel.
Thank you. Please give them a larger round of applause. Great. I think for me, this was probably one of the best panels I have listened to. It provides us an opportunity to understand where the opportunities lie, where financing is, policy, where policy and private sector come together to ensure that we develop our respective continents. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier this morning, thank you very much, panelists. Earlier this morning, and again during our high-level panel, we heard political and business leaders emphasize the need for greater investment, the importance of reforms, and above all, the necessity of ensuring that MSMEs and African entrepreneurs are not left behind. So for the Global Gateway strategy to deliver the results that it needs, and to have truly win-win outcomes for private sector as well as policy, if I could ask all the panelists, if we could please engage outside the room, if protocol could assist, please. Young businesses and innovators must be at the heart of the effort that we are going to put in. We need investment at their level to empower the next generation of African business leaders. The strong example of this approach is the Team Europe initiative investing in young businesses in Africa, supported by the European Union, 10 member states, and EU development finance institutions. This initiative is designed to bring real opportunities and tailored support to entrepreneurs and SMEs across the continent. So to introduce this initiative, currently chaired by Team Belgium, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Bart Horemans from the Belgian International Cooperation and Agency Enable to take the floor. He will present the program and highlight Belgium's priorities on youth and entrepreneurship. Mr. Horemans, the floor is yours. Please let's give him a round of applause.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure and an honor to open this TI-IYBA showcase at this important business forum. I speak today on behalf of the CEO of Enable, the Belgian Agency for International Cooperation, Mr. Jean van Wetter, who is still on his way due to the weather conditions in Europe. He apologizes sincerely. He is also chair of the Team Europe initiative investing in young businesses in Africa. This moment comes at a time when Africa entrepreneurs, youth-led businesses and growing SMEs are driving some of the most dynamic transformations on the continent. The Global Gateway, as was mentioned several times before today, is about creating win-win situations for all partners involved, including young entrepreneurs across Africa who are critical actors of change today, bringing innovation, solution for economic and societal growth. Africa's young entrepreneurs are today some of the most important actors. They are building solutions in digital transformation, clean energy, agro-processing, logistics, and social services. But Global Gateway also reminds us that supporting young businesses means investing in the entire enabling environment. Reliable energy, digital connectivity, transport infrastructure, modern supply chains, and this includes, of course, also opportunity-driven skills systems. These investments make it possible for SMEs to reduce costs, scale up, and compete, and they are essential for strengthening value chains where medium-sized and scaling firms play the anchoring role. The TEI IYBA of In Full Team Europe initiative investing in young business in Africa since 2021 has brought together the European Union, 10 member states, the IB, the EBRD and the European DFIs in a common ambition to support early stage businesses and young entrepreneurs, especially women. You will see in the video later on how this program is structured. Let me go directly now to the Belgian presidency's priorities. As current chair of this TI IYBA, Belgium is placing 3 strategic priorities at the center of our collective effort. First, youth at the heart of economic transformation. Belgium's approach places youth at the core of its development priorities. As chair, Belgium is actively steering TI IBA to shift the narrative around youth. They are not only startup founders, but also employers, suppliers, innovators, and the future leaders within more established firms. Belgium therefore strongly emphasizes the role of medium-sized and scaling enterprises, which are essential to Africa's economic resilience. These firms structure value chains, absorb young talent, and open new markets, making them central to our collective work under the IYBA. Second point, the mobilization of private capital providers. Public funding is vital, but insufficient in itself, and in the current situation, expecting to decrease even. So to meet the scale of Africa's entrepreneurial ambitions, we must broaden the community of investors engaged in this TI-IBA. Impact funds, foundations, African financiers, corporate and institutional investors, and family offices all have a role to play. Belgium is strongly committed to deepening this collaboration and ensuring private capital is at the table. Under Belgium's leadership, fostering a collaborative network of private capital providers to strengthen policy dialogue and blended finance solutions is a central priority, as developed closely with the European Commission and Member States. Last, the third priority for Belgium is strengthening the Team Europe partnerships. In the context of geopolitical shifts and economic uncertainty, Belgium firmly believes that our collective action is our greatest strength. TI-IYBA is a concrete example of this unity in practice, and so are also the many other TIs as we know today. Aligning diverse partners to deliver real impact for youth and entrepreneurship in Africa. In the 2 videos, which we'll show directly, you're about to see how these things are coming to life. The first presents the structure and governance of the TI-IYBA and its regional programs, among them the IYBA seat. The second highlights early results on the ground. The entrepreneurs, SMEs, and value chain actors who work embodies the impact of this Team Europe initiative and this Team Europe spirit. Conclusion. As you watch, I invite you to reflect on a simple question. How can we, as Team Europe and Team Africa, further expand opportunities for young people by strengthening the firms and the value chains that power African economies? Thank you very much on behalf of Jean van Wetter, on behalf of the Belgian government and the Belgian state, and really enjoy the videos. Thank you very much.
Recent studies forecast Africa's working age population will grow by 450 million, while the continent's economies are expected to generate only 100 million new jobs. Picture an African innovator with a brilliant idea. She wants to turn local agricultural waste into sustainable products. Easy to imagine, right? That's because 1 in every 5 Africans is an entrepreneur. But our young entrepreneur faces challenges that make success difficult to reach. Obstacles that threaten her dream. This is where the Team Europe initiative, Investing in Young Businesses in Africa, IYBA, plays a key role. Launched in 2021 by the European Union, 10 member states and European Development Financial Institutions, this initiative connects partners, investors and support organizations across Africa and Europe to help early-stage African businesses and SMEs start, grow and thrive. Built on 3 pillars, it offers financial and technical support tailored to each stage of growth and strengthens entrepreneurship ecosystems. The IYBA Team Europe initiative is an umbrella for a growing mix of regional programs and financial tools, each with its own focus, goals and reach. Through the IYBA Seed program, the EU and its partners are working in Benin, Kenya, Senegal, South Africa and Togo to strengthen entrepreneurial ecosystems and improve access to business development services for very early and early stage businesses. At the same time, they support the business environment through policy reforms and public-private dialogues. The IYBA Women Entrepreneurship for Africa program, We4A, tackles the challenges many women face in building their businesses. While a quarter of Africa's businesses are run by women, most operate informally and in tough conditions. We4A works in 8 sub-Saharan countries, helping women in the green economy with training, mentoring, seed funding and support to secure further investment. In Africa, early-stage businesses and MSMEs are often seen as too risky. The IYBA Invest and IYBA Market Creation Platform programs are changing that, building a pipeline of funds and ready-to-invest projects. By uniting Team Europe, public funders, developmental finance institutions, and private investors, they help businesses reach the stage where major capital is ready to step in. The IYBA Market Creation Platform, IYBA MCP program, provides financial and technical support to investment funds and funds of funds and aims to act as a pipeline creation engine. Through blended finance, IYBA Invest provides first-loss risk capital to support the creation and consolidation of locally domiciled impact funds. By taking on more of the early risk, it encourages other investors to join the project, helping fill the funding gap many call the missing middle. The IYBA We Do program taps into remittances from the African diaspora in Europe, directing them into micro and small businesses. It also offers technical support and connects these businesses to local entrepreneurial networks. Finally, the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, or EFSD Plus, helps MSMEs in sub-Saharan Africa get the financing they need by lowering risk for European finance institutions and strengthening local intermediary lenders. Many EFSD Plus guarantees carry the IYBA label, reflecting their shared goals and close alignment with other programs. The IYBA Team Europe initiative is expanding across Africa, helping more and more entrepreneurs build sustainable, job-creating businesses and shaping the future of the continent.
Awesome. I don't want to stand between you and lunch. I think I can see lots of eyes already looking at me like, Madame Moderator, can you finish up? But before we continue, I promise, one speaker. There's new opportunities and really looking at financing young entrepreneurs in Africa, and I think it will be worth your while to stick around. Investiseur and Partenaire is a leading impact investment group supporting SMEs and startups across sub-Saharan Africa, and a key partner of the IYBA program and the European Commission. So to present this newly announced IYBA investment program and to share how INP mobilizes private capital to co-invest in African SMEs, please help me welcome Mrs. Noos Beer, Director for Investments at INP. Ms. Beer, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. So my name is Noos B. I'm an investment director at INP. INP is a pioneering impact investor that has been active in Africa for over 20 years, financing, supporting, and promoting entrepreneurs and SMEs who are transforming Africa, but very often they are overlooked by investors despite their immense growth potential and impact potential. So to date, INP has supported more than 330 companies operating in various sectors and based in sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly through its fund called IPDev for INP Development. INP has been a groundbreaking sponsor fund that has launched, developed, and supported emerging African fund managers in 9 countries across West Africa, East Africa, and Madagascar. IPDev has been a key instrument to mobilize blended finance, both from international investors and African investors, private and public alike. In its first phase, IPDev has raised 21 million euros in capital, 3 million in catalytic capital, and 4 million euros in grants. And this funding has served to anchor local investment funds in 7 countries, in Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Uganda, and Madagascar. And 2 other funds are now in inception. These funds have in turn attracted local capital from 85 investors, raising a total of 22 million euros. This demonstrates a double leverage effect at the level of IPDev. As a result, after 10 years of operation, we've been able to fund 60 SMEs that benefit not just from the capital and grants, but also from capacity building through our local funds, with a clear impact on their commercial performance, their capacity to accelerate their growth and create more jobs. IPDev is now at the second stage of its development, and as such, we are very proud to be one of the new recipients of IYBA Invest. This financial support will bring in a total contribution of 24 million euros through a blended finance instrument, and will have 2 major components. Firstly, this initiative will allow IPDev to sustain its financial support for all the locally based funds, enhancing both their capabilities and those of their investment companies. The funding provided by IYBA Invest is expected to attract both development finance institutions capital and also local investors to collaborate with IPDev. And this would create a significant leverage effect. We anticipate an additional 17 million that will be secured from international investors, and we aim to mobilize further 25 million euros from local capital providers to invest directly into the locally domiciled funds. This financing will also be key to expand the networks of now 9 to five or six new countries considered as frontiers, such as DRC, Benin, or Mozambique. The second key component of IYBA Invest with INP will be around pipeline building and acceleration of SMEs through a mix of technical assistance, seed funding, in order to prepare these SMEs to receive later stage capital from partner funds. So IYBA Invest will definitely accelerate our efforts as we aim to invest in additional 200 SMEs and develop a pipeline of up to 80 companies across 15 countries in total. Through this program, we can demonstrate that supporting entrepreneurs in Africa is crucial for developing a thriving private sector, fostering inclusive growth, and creating successful job opportunities. Thanks a lot for your attention.
It certainly was worth my while. Let's give them another round of applause for the work that's being done. And maybe just I want to thank you, Mr. Horemans, as well as Ms. B, for their contribution, for their insightful contributions, for showcasing the impact of this initiative in Africa. Right, we are almost at lunch. I promise there's no more speeches. We are going for lunch. But I just wanted to announce, after lunch, we have 4 thematic panel discussions happening in 4 different venues, or rather 2 different venues. So at 2 to 3:30, we have renewable energy and transport and logistics, those 2 panels. One is happening in Crystal 1, and that's 1 floor up, I think to the 2nd floor. And the other one is happening in transport and logistics in Diamante 1, which is here. And then at 4 to 5:30, we have pharmaceuticals and health. That's happening in Crystal 1 again, which is on the 2nd floor. And then digital connections are happening in Diamante 1, in here. Following these thematic panels, we want you to please come back here at 5:30. If you gather here in this forum for the presentation of the business declaration, what is it that we want to see coming out of this? We will then return to plenary at 1800 to formally close the day. So I invite you to enjoy your lunch. Please enjoy it. It will be served in restaurant Curadoria on the 1st floor at the other end of this floor. So just on the other side. And then another place where you could have the same lunch is in the Sky Lounge on the 24th floor. Now, I don't know how many of you would want to go up to the 24th floor, but I guess the view will be amazing. And so pick your venue for lunch. It's either Restaurant Curadoria or the Sky Lounge. So hostesses are available outside to guide you. Please take this opportunity to network and get to know other people that can help you build your business or help you with policy decisions that you need to make to invest in Africa or in the countries of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock for the first 2 thematic panels, and then at 4 o'clock again for the next thematic panels. Thank you very much.